Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Corvus, and welcome to Yacc, yet another Crowcast where I pick a game, I play it for a week, and then I'll talk about it. This week's game is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was released in 1989, developed by Konami, and published by Ultra Games. Which is more or less Konami in disguise, because back in the day, Nintendo didn't want a company to publish more like 10 or 11 games per year. And also there will be spoilers up ahead, just so you know, but first a little backstory. When I grew up, I had a friend named Kenny, which was more or less like the real Kenny in South Park. He injured himself a lot and he was always sick. And when I was at his place, we either played Super Mario or we played this game. It's kind of one of those things, you know, growing up in the 80s and early 90s, you know, playing with the toys and playing the games and stuff. So if you start up the game and wait a bit, you will be introduced to the Turtles one by one. Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael. And the sequence ends with Splinter the Rat, their sensei, pointing at the bad guys, Shredder and April O'Neil, being bound up. So each of the turtles are different. They have strength and different reach with their weapons. So if you press the start button at any time, you will bring up the area of the map and the turtles. So you can select between the turtles, and they each have different life bars. So if one turtle drops low on health, you can always switch to the other one, which is useful. And you can replenish your health with pizzas. So just like the show, they eat pizza, right? So you have these slices of pizza icons and you have a full pizza. So the slice replenishes some health while the full pizza restores full health. And if for some reason the turtle's life drops below a certain point, you start to beep. It is an annoying beep. So as the game really starts, you're in front of a sewer grate and your first instinct is to go down that hole, and the enemies that you will encounter down here are scorpions, foot soldiers that throws ninja stars at you, and there's also a mini boss. And this little stage or sewer entrance will teach you one thing: if you enter one hole, you will get out the other side. That sounded bad. But yeah, each turtle has a different weapon, and you can press the B button to use that weapon. And if you press up or down, you will swing the weapon in that direction, if that makes sense. And you have the A button, which is the jump button. And if you get any special weapons like the boomerangs or ninja stars or scrolls, you can press the select button to switch between the ordinary weapons and the special weapons. So this game has two views: the overhead view, which is like Zelda 1, you're out walking in the world. And then you have the side-scrolling world. Every time you enter a building or a sewer or anything like that, it will switch to a side-scrolling gameplay instead. So area 1 is more or less straightforward. You go through sewers, you explore buildings, and eventually you will find Bebop, which is one of the characters from the series. He's like a hog with glasses, and you beat him up, and his buddy Rocksteady will pick up April and leave, because for some reason she has been kidnapped. There's also a funny thing. There's this house that you can enter on the way to the final fight with Rocksteady. And it's a house, so when you enter the house, it's crawling with enemies all over the place. And one of the things about the enemies is that Konami didn't pick the enemies from the series or the comic books or anything like that. They just made up their own. The bosses are the only thing that's like really tied to anything. So you can have guys with chainsaws and upside down trousers flying things. I don't even know what they are. And you have these dragonflies and scorpions. But I mean, it works. As a kid, I didn't really care about it that much, but as an adult, I kind of picked up on it. So at the top of this building full of enemies, there is this full restore pizza, but it's not worth getting it because you have to clear the bottom floor and you have to climb up to the top. And this game teases you by, when you enter the building, you see the pizza like that's up one floor, but as I said, it's not worth it. And then it's time to fight Rocksteady. And this is one of those fights that everybody knows about. You just confront him and then you run to the right and stand upon the boxes and duck. And with Donatello's bow, which is the most OP of the turtles to play, don't play as anyone else but Don. So you stand on these boxes to the right and you press down and a D-pad and use the B button. And when Rocksteady is like ducking, you need to hit him. For some reason there is something weird with the hitbox going on. And every review I watched on YouTube or anyone talking about this game, they mentioned this glitch. And it's kind of useful because Rocksteady has a machine gun and I think it hurts a lot. I didn't stand enough near to find out. So when April gets rescued, she will help you throughout the adventure. So She will give you some helpful tips if you press the start button, and that's about it. So the next area, area 2, is about being underwater and defusing 8 bombs within the time limit of 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So you have to avoid electric barriers, tangleweed, burning algae, and the current itself is against you. So yeah, I never beat this stage as a kid, but I'm not ashamed to admit it, but now I did. No biggie, but back then it was hard. I actually lost one of the turtles during this disarmament, but the bombs that were disarmed stay disarmed until you get a game over, which is good. So after the bombs are disarmed, you get a cutscene where Splinter has been kidnapped by the Shredder and the turtles go after him, obviously. So I started to explore the new area, and you do this with the Turtle Mobile, which is the car from the series, and you can shoot with the A button, I think, and the B button launches missiles. So you find these missiles in houses, and I think you can find them in sewers as well. So you have these barriers that you have to shoot down in order to get to like some house roofs, because throughout this segment you also collect ropes, and I didn't know what they were. They looked like white guys on blue backgrounds, like happy white dudes. I guess it was kind of like, what is that? It was no explanation whatsoever. If I had a manual, it probably would have said exactly what it was. But so it was one thing I forgot to talk about. When you're collecting these missiles, you will end up in a sewer area where you need to do a lot of platforming, and it was painful because if you fall down in the water, you will be flushed out. You don't lose any health, but you have to restart the stage over again. And the platforming is a bit finicky. I learned that if you tap the A button, you do a shorter jump, and if you hold it, you do like a big spinning jumpy thing. And just like Ninja Gaiden, the enemy spawns exactly where you don't want them. So you do this tricky jump, you have to pull up your sword or your weapon or whatever and hit the enemy, and you just have to inch your way. And that's one of the things about the stages. Enemies spawn in on the sides of the screen, so you kind of inch through this warehouse or whatever, and the enemies just spawn in. It's kind of annoying, and when there are a lot of enemies on screen, there's a lot of like sprite flickering, which is typical of these types of games. And also during this platform sequence, there is knockback, so you're on this tiny platform, and if an enemy hits you, you fall right into the water again. So I managed to clear that area, and I went up on the rooftops. So this is when I realized that the white dudes with the black background, or blue background I should say, were ropes. So I used a lot of ropes, and I went up in the boss area. So there's this black turtle. I don't know if he has seen a costume or whatever, or if it's like in the shade. I don't remember him from the comics. But you beat him up, and then he turns into a metal turtle, mecha turtle, and you beat him. The second stage is actually easier than the first one. And then you save Splinter and you move on. So about this time in the game, I was more or less done with it. I didn't have any patience to continue playing because it's really hard with everything. And when I actually ended up in this place where you're supposed to get the blimp, the flying balloon turtle thingy, but when everything loaded up, it's like a lot of sewage areas and you have to go through. I was like, no, and there are dead ends. And I was like, I don't feel like playing anymore. And I know also there's like a later stage, the final stage is at the technodrome itself. But a lot of players swear that they will never beat this game. And I don't feel embarrassed saying that I will never beat this game myself. So gameplay. Fight your way through the stages and stop Shredder's evil plans. Control, the D-pad moves the turtles around. The B button uses the weapons. The A button jumps. The start button pauses. In the overworld, brings up the menu where you can change between the turtles, get helpful tips, and yeah, get the map. The select cycles between the extra weapons and normal weapons. Graphics. There is one cool thing about the graphics. When you select between the different turtles, they actually have the right corresponding colors. So Donatello has the purple, Michelangelo has the orange, Raphael has the red, and Donatello has the blue one. That's kind of cool. There's a really big problem with sprite flickers in this game. If there are a lot of enemies on the screen, there will be a lot of flicker. And for some reason, the enemies in this game has nothing to do with the series, the movies, or the comics. Konami just said like, well, let's put something in like dragonflies and scorpions. And as a kid, as I said before, I didn't have any problems with that. But as an adult, I was like, what is this thing? Is this Jason? I think it's a meme at this point, this guy with like a chainsaw, or maybe Leatherface is a better name for it, but sound and music. Jun Fanashi, made the soundtrack for this game. And it's actually really good. I like every track. It gets me hyped to play. And I actually have one of the tracks as my default ringtone for my, well, phone. Easter egg, secrets, and glitches. So there was one glitch I figured out by myself this week. If you fall into the water where there's like a stream in the side-scrolling stages, just before you hit the water, swing your weapons button, press B, and the sprite will flicker out a bit before returning to the struggling turtle getting pulled down the stream. So there's a YouTuber that I follow called Displaced Gamers, and he goes through NES ROMs, like the data from a cart, basically dumped on a hard drive. So apparently the infamous disarming bomb sequence underwater is actually flawed in programming. So when you think you are, swimming up, it's actually programmed wrong. He actually shows how everything works, and it's kind of, he dissects it, and it says like, if you would have written the code like this, it would have been better. And he implements it and makes it better, which is kind of funny. In conclusion, I wrote, yes, play it if you feel nostalgic, but for new players, don't. So this game is really hard, and the enemies respawn in, and that causes a lot of sprite flickers. So when you get into a room, you want to nudge the D-pad a bit, so you spawn in a bit of enemies, but not all of them, because then the sprite flicker happens. And I don't know if it's just my TV or what it was, but there's a little bit of button delay. And once you get into the flow and everything, it's just fine. So going in this week, playing a game that I remember playing with my buddy Kenny back in the day. We had a lot of fun, even though we didn't make it far. It's one of those things that I live on nostalgia, where I'm like, this game is awesome, this is great, and remember the music and all the fun times we had. But going back to it, it wasn't fun. A lot of the platforming sequences were straight out of hell, and I was like, I can't beat this game if I want to, but I don't want to, because then I would abuse the save state feature, and that's not how games are supposed to be played. So I'd much rather be nostalgic about the toys, the TV series and everything, and probably forget this game exists. I will occasionally, as I said, I have the ringtone on my phone and everything. I can listen to the soundtrack. That's about it. So anyway, thanks for listening and or watching, and take care.